The stability we witness every day is nothing but a historical illusion. Earth is not a quiet planet. It is a massive thermodynamic engine, and right now this engine is broadcasting signals of catastrophic misalignment. Scientists are currently evaluating an incredibly concerning probability, a 1 in 6 chance of a devastating volcanic eruption occurring within this century. This is not merely a localized geological event. It possesses the kinetic force to completely reshape the global climate ecosystem and collapse the infrastructure of modern civilization. Simultaneously, deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, one of the planet's most critical climate-regulating ocean currents is showing severe signs of exhaustion. The concurrent disruption of both our atmospheric space and deep ocean currents creates an unprecedented stress test for humanity. We are not facing a single hurricane or an isolated drought. We are looking at the systemic fracture of macro-level systems. To accurately comprehend the scale of this threat, we must dissect how these engines actually operate. Let us first examine the oceanic engine. Recently, a specific acronym has repeatedly surfaced in global warnings, AMOC. For many viewers, this might sound abstract or overly academic. It stands for the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Do not worry about the complex terminology. Think of the AMOC as a colossal, relentless conveyor belt operating on the ocean floor. Warm, salty water from the tropical equator flows steadily northward toward North America and Europe. This massive volume of water carries immense thermal energy. It physically warms the entire European continent, keeping its winters from turning into a deep freeze. As this water reaches higher latitudes, the cold air strips away its heat. Cold, salty water is denser. It gets heavy and sinks to the ocean floor. Once it hits the bottom, this cold mass flows back toward the south. This continuous downward push creates a vacuum at the surface, which pulls up fresh, warm water from the equator to take its place. This single loop controls the climate of half the hemisphere. That mechanism is breaking down. Rising global temperatures are melting the massive ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica at a staggering rate. The runoff from these melting glaciers is pure fresh water. When billions of tons of fresh water combine with increasing rainfall dump into the North Atlantic, it dilutes the ocean's salinity. The physical principle is basic fresh water is lighter than salt water. This accumulation of fresh water on the surface physically prevents the cold water from sinking. That downward sink is the primary pulling force that drives the entire AMOC conveyor belt. When the engine breaks, the system collapses. Once this conveyor belt stops entirely, the process becomes irreversible, even if the Earth subsequently cools down. We have already recorded an unnatural warming of the ocean off the US East Coast and the appearance of a massive, freezing cold blob of water south of Greenland. These are the two most glaring clinical symptoms confirming that the AMOC is critically weakening. Right now, this current is at its weakest state in 1600 years. The second engine sits directly above our heads in the stratosphere. Earth's climate history is clearly preserved beneath miles of thick ice. By drilling deep into this ice, scientists retrieve cores containing ancient air bubbles. These bubbles lock in the exact chemical composition of the atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Data from these ice cores demonstrates a direct correlation between supervolcanic eruptions and global cooling events. The eruption of Mount Tambora in 1815 remains the largest in recorded history. It blasted an unimaginable volume of particulate matter and sulfur high into the sky. This material physically blocked incoming sunlight and cooled the planet. The result was the infamous year without a summer. Temperatures plummeted. Crops failed globally. A cholera pandemic broke out, claiming tens of thousands of lives. In our modern era, a super eruption would operate through a far more destructive mechanism. Today's atmosphere holds massive amounts of greenhouse gases and is significantly more turbulent than in the past. Dr. Thomas Aubrey discovered that in a hotter, more chaotic environment, the sulfur dioxide released by volcanoes spreads faster and covers a vastly wider area. When it reacts with water vapor, this gas forms sulfate aerosols. These are microscopic droplets that act as a planetary shade, reflecting sunlight back into space. An even distribution of this chemical veil amplifies the cooling effect. Experts calculate that under future climate conditions, surface cooling could intensify by an additional 15%. The Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai eruption in January 2022 proved the raw power of nature. This underwater volcano fired an ash plume 187,000 feet into the sky. It punched straight through the stratosphere and breached the mesosphere, a region normally reserved for burning meteors. Tsunamis from the blast reached as far as Japan and South America. The economic damage instantly wiped out nearly 20% of Tonga's gross domestic product. Weather shifts do not exist purely in theory. They physically collide with infrastructure. The global geopolitical structure will be tested to its absolute limit if the AMOC shuts down completely. Europe's climate will experience an extreme thermal shock. Without that warm current, temperatures in London could drop by 18 degrees Fahrenheit. The British capital would feel as cold as northern Canada. Stockholm risks a 5-4-degree plunge, transforming the Nordic environment into a harsh, frozen wasteland resembling Siberia. Ice and snow would blanket northern Europe year-round. Power grids would buckle under the massive demand for heating. Commercial waterways would freeze solid. The entire continental supply chain would be paralyzed. The most devastating impact, however, lies in the disruption of tropical monsoon systems. The AMOC plays a crucial role in regulating rainfall across South America, Africa, and Asia. A stalled conveyor belt means the West African monsoon would shift or disappear entirely. The direct consequence is catastrophic drought and widespread famine on a continental scale. The Amazon rainforest could lose its primary water supply and rapidly degrade into dry savanna. In India and Southeast Asia, where the livelihoods of hundreds of millions depend on monsoon rains, the absence of these storms will trigger an unprecedented agricultural crisis. From a geopolitical standpoint, this is the ultimate catalyst for global instability. Tens of millions of climate refugees in Asia and Africa will be forced to migrate. This will exert crushing pressure on international borders. Europe will face a massive influx of displaced people while simultaneously battling bone-chilling winters. Across the Atlantic, the United States will face a coastal infrastructure crisis. A weakened AMOC means warm water is no longer pulled north, causing it to pile up along the U.S. East Coast. Sea levels there are projected to rise by up to 3.2 feet. This elevated water level, combined with warming ocean surfaces, creates the perfect incubator for far more destructive superhurricanes. Current levee systems are simply not engineered for this scenario. Strategic naval bases and major economic hubs like New York and Miami will face the constant threat of inundation. This will severely cripple logistics and military readiness. We must also examine the data sealed deep beneath the Antarctic ice. It is not just frozen water down there. Hidden beneath the surface are highly active volcanoes, such as Mount Erebus. This volcano has maintained a boiling lava lake for decades in the middle of the coldest environment on Earth. Research indicates that geothermal heat from below is melting the ice at its base, creating vast networks of subglacial freshwater lakes. This water acts as a lubricant. Friction decreases, allowing massive Antarctic ice sheets to slide faster toward the ocean. The faster it slides, the more ice melts. As this colossal weight disappears, the pressure exerted on the Earth's crust decreases. This drop in pressure can trigger the very subglacial volcanoes that were lying dormant. It is a fatal feedback loop. Melting ice unleashes volcanoes, and erupting volcanoes melt more ice. This cycle possesses the capability to raise global sea levels uncontrollably, threatening to drown coastal cities worldwide. The Younger Dryas deep freeze 12900 years ago offers a similar lesson. Northern Hemisphere temperatures plummeted by over 27 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few decades. Scientists initially suspected an asteroid impact. However, ice core data revealed no trace of iridium, the signature element of space rocks. Instead, platinum spikes pointed directly to underwater volcanic eruptions in the North Atlantic. It could also have been caused by a massive glacial lake in North America bursting, dumping quadrillions of gallons of fresh water into the ocean, stalling the AMOC, and freezing the hemisphere. History has a habit of repeating its own models. Navigating the gray area between verified data trends and scientific hypotheses is the core focus here at American Sky Brief. 1-2 million year old ice core data. And the Earth's physical movement through Milankovitch cycles prove that large-scale weather shifts are real and cyclical. Yet the velocity of these cycles is being fundamentally altered by human interference. Recent studies from leading scientific journals like Nature indicate that if current greenhouse gas emissions continue, there is a 95% chance the AMOC will collapse before 2100. This is no longer a paper theory. Currents are slowing, salinity is dropping, ice is sliding faster. Faced with this reality, our strategic response is severely misaligned. Space agencies like NASA spend billions developing asteroid defense systems. Meanwhile, the probability of a supervolcanic eruption is exponentially higher, yet absolutely no global contingency plan exists. Volcanologist Michael Cassidy has pointed out this critical failure. A moderate blast injecting sulfur into the stratosphere is enough to dim sunlight for years, paralyzing global agricultural production. Changing extreme weather patterns, including unnaturally heavy rainfall, are seeping deep into geological faults. This increases steam pressure and threatens to trigger the 716 known active volcanoes above ground. Regions like Iceland, Chile, and Indonesia are identified as the primary hotspots facing this imminent threat. Humanity does not possess the technology to plug an erupting volcano or manually restart the AMOC ocean current. Our only viable survival strategy relies on proactive infrastructure design and contingency planning. We must thoroughly map volcanic hazard zones, vulnerable to weather-triggered eruptions. More importantly, governments must prepare massive, actionable population evacuation plans. Power grids must be entirely restructured to operate reliably under extreme temperature fluctuations. The cornerstone of survival is establishing colossal strategic food reserves. We must prepare for back-to-back years of global crop failures caused by atmospheric cooling. Nature does not collapse overnight like a Hollywood disaster film. Coastlines will not vanish after a single massive wave. The transformation will execute storm by storm, flood by flood, and temperature shift by temperature shift over decades. Weather is not just daily rain or sunshine. It is a massive kinetic force, continuously testing the endurance of every piece of infrastructure humanity has built. Analyzing the skies and the oceans is how we measure the safety margins of our own civilization. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth analysis on American Sky Brief. We will see you next time.